They thought she was just another ordinary woman walking into the courthouse that morning. But within days, her name would be on the lips of every person in that town, and the truth about who she really was would silence an entire courtroom. Dear viewers, stay with me till the very end of this story, because what you are about to hear will move you in ways you never expected. And while you're here, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The sun was already hot when Dr. Linda Harris stepped out of her modest black sedan and walked toward the tall stone building of the Maple County Courthouse. She wore a plain navy blue blazer and carried a simple leather briefcase. Nothing about her looked unusual. She blended in with the crowd of people climbing the courthouse steps. Some came for traffic tickets, some for family disputes, others to sit on jury day. But for two police officers standing at the top of the steps, Linda was not just another face in the crowd. "Look who we have here," Officer Brian Cooper said, pointing directly at her as if he had spotted a target. His partner, Officer Jason Miller, let out a laugh so loud that people turned their heads. "Your Majesty," Cooper mocked, bowing low as Linda drew closer. "Need help finding the food stamp office?" Miller slapped his thigh and bent over in exaggerated laughter. He even wiped fake tears from his eyes, the kind of performance that wasn't just disrespectful, it was meant to humiliate. Linda stopped. She could feel her whole body tighten. Years of discipline had trained her to keep calm when insulted, but that did not erase the sting of being ridiculed in front of strangers. Her brown eyes scanned both men carefully, as if she were cataloging every gesture, every word, every smirk. She adjusted her briefcase with steady hands and walked past them without a single word. The officers exchanged a quick grin, believing they had won this small battle of shame. They had no idea that the woman they mocked had sat in rooms with presidents, briefed cabinet members, and carried secrets they could never imagine. Inside the courthouse, the air was heavy. Wooden benches were packed with people waiting for hearings. A buzzing fluorescent light hummed above, adding to the tense atmosphere. Linda walked slowly down the center aisle, her heels clicking on the old floor. Heads turned as she passed. She held herself tall, shoulders straight, her face calm but unreadable. At the front, Judge Edward Wilson adjusted his glasses as he shuffled papers. His tired eyes scanned the room, pausing for a moment on Linda. To him, she looked like just another defendant who would probably argue too much and get nowhere. When the bailiff, Charles Bennett, called the case, Linda sat at the defense table with her lawyer, Jessica Brown. Jessica was sharp, confident, and ready for battle, though even she knew this would not be easy. Across the aisle sat Officer Cooper and Officer Miller, their uniforms crisp, their badges shining under the courtroom lights. Cooper leaned back in his chair with the same smug grin he had worn outside. Miller gave Linda a look that said, "Try to escape this one." The room grew quiet as the first witness was It was Officer Cooper himself. He stood tall, walked to the witness stand, and placed his right hand on the Bible. "State your name for the record," Jessica said, her voice clear. "Officer Brian Cooper," he replied confidently. "Badge number 4187. 15 years of service to this community." He made sure to look directly at Linda as he said those words, emphasizing his authority. From the gallery, a few jurors nodded along. A seasoned police officer always carried weight in a courtroom, and Cooper knew it. He leaned into the microphone and began telling his story about a traffic stop weeks earlier. He spoke about how Linda had been pulled over for driving over the speed limit. He said she had been argumentative, loud, and aggressive. He claimed she accused them of racial profiling and waved around fake documents pretending to be a federal agent. "Classic tactic," he told the jury. "People like her think if they dress nice and talk big, they can scare us into letting them go." Every word carried an undertone of contempt. Linda sat still, her pen scratching softly against a notebook as she took notes. She did not interrupt. She did not look shaken. Her silence seemed to frustrate Cooper even more. As he continued his testimony, Cooper described her as manipulative, saying she rehearsed her answers like she had practiced lying many times before. He smirked as he looked at the jury, certain his words were sinking in. Jessica Brown stood and objected once, but Judge Wilson only gave a mild warning. The damage had already been done. Cooper's story had painted Linda as a liar before she even had the chance to speak. From the gallery, Officer Miller nodded firmly at every point Cooper made, as if his silent agreement was proof enough. The courtroom began to lean toward believing them two experienced officers against one woman. Linda's face, however, never changed. She wrote, underlined, and kept her breathing steady. When Cooper finally stepped down, he glanced at Linda with eyes full of arrogance. His look said clearly, You can't fight this. Not here. But Linda knew something he didn't. Truth has its own way of speaking, even when people try to bury it. The session adjourned for a short break. People whispered as they shuffled out. Some looked at Linda with suspicion, others with pity. The weight of the officer's words hung in the air. Linda walked out into the hallway, her briefcase still in hand. The same officers leaned against the wall near the exit, smirking once again. You should quit while you can, Miller muttered as she passed. Linda stopped for just a moment. She looked at both men, not with anger, but with a calmness that made them uneasy. She didn't respond. She simply walked on, her silence louder than any insult. Back inside the courtroom, Jessica leaned close. They think they've already won. Let them enjoy it, she whispered. Tomorrow is our turn. Linda nodded gently. She knew patience was her greatest weapon. As the day ended and she stepped out of the courthouse into the fading light, she felt the stares of strangers burning into her back. To them, she was just a defendant fighting two respected officers. But the truth was far deeper, and when the right moment came, everything would change. For now, the world saw her as ordinary. But tomorrow, they would begin to see who she really was. The morning of the second day inside the Maple County Courthouse felt different. The benches were more crowded. Word had spread about the case, and people came to see what the fuss was about. Two police officers testifying against a black woman always carried a certain weight in that town. Many expected the case to be simple, already decided. But something about the calm way Dr. Linda Harris carried herself yesterday had left people whispering. Linda walked in quietly, her navy blazer pressed, her briefcase tucked firmly under her arm. She did not rush. She did not look down. Every step was measured. She took her seat beside her lawyer, Jessica Brown, who gave her a firm nod. Across the aisle, Officer Brian Cooper leaned back in his chair, the same arrogant smile still resting on his face. His partner, Officer Jason Miller, sat stiff, hands folded, eyes darting toward the crowd as if he felt the pressure of so many stares. When Judge Edward Wilson entered, the courtroom rose. His gavel fell, calling the room to order. Bring in the next witness, he said. This time, it was Linda's turn. The bailiff, Charles Bennett, stepped forward with the Bible. Linda rose slowly, her posture straight as a line. She placed her right hand on the Bible and raised her left. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Bennett asked. I do, Linda replied. Her voice was not loud, but it carried across the room with quiet certainty. State your name for the record, Judge Wilson instructed. Dr. Linda Harris. The title made the jurors shift in their seats. Some raised their eyebrows. Doctor? That was not in Cooper's version of events yesterday. He had called her aggressive, a liar, a woman pretending to be someone she was not. But he had not said she carried the doctorate. Jessica Brown approached. Dr. Harris, please tell the court what happened on the evening of March 15th. Linda clasped her hands in front of her. She did not rush. She began with precise details. At exactly 7:47 p.m., I noticed flashing lights in my rearview mirror. I immediately turned on my hazard lights and pulled over to the side of Highway 47 within 43 seconds, lowered my window completely, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and waited for the officer's approach, as outlined in standard safety procedures. The jurors leaned forward. She wasn't speaking like a frightened defendant. She was speaking like someone trained in procedure. And what happened next? Jessica asked. Officer Cooper approached with his hand resting on his weapon. This is unusual, though not unprecedented. I greeted him calmly and informed him that I would reach into my briefcase for my license and registration. At the same time, I retrieved my federal identification, as required by protocol when traveling on official government business. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Cooper sat up straight, his smirk fading slightly. Miller shifted in his seat. Jessica's voice was steady. How did the officer respond when you presented your identification? Linda's expression did not change. He looked at it for approximately 15 seconds. Then he handed it back and said, These look real fancy, but anybody can buy fake badges online these days. He ordered me out of the vehicle immediately. The room erupted in whispers. Judge Wilson banged his gavel. Order in the court. Jessica nodded. Did you comply with his order? Yes. I stepped out of the vehicle with both hands visible. I told him that he could verify my credentials immediately through the Department of Homeland Security duty officer. I gave him the direct verification number printed on the card issued to all federal personnel. Gasps spread through the gallery. Federal personnel? The jury exchanged looks. Cooper clenched his jaw, glaring at Linda, but she never looked back at him. And what was his response? Jessica asked. He told me he did not have time for my games. He told his partner to call for backup. He said, and I quote, "We've got a live one here who thinks she's FBI or something." The jurors whispered again. Jessica let the words sink in before continuing. Dr. Harris, throughout this interaction, how would you describe your own behavior? Calm, professional, cooperative. At no point did I raise my voice, resist, or act aggressively. Did the officers follow proper procedure when you offered them your credentials? I.e. dull eye. They ignored both the identification and the verification channel provided. That is a violation of protocol. Linda's words hung in the air. The courtroom was no longer leaning toward the officers as it had yesterday. Now, there was doubt. Now, there were questions. Cooper leaned toward his lawyer, whispering furiously. Miller sat stiff, avoiding Linda's gaze. Jessica placed a manila folder on the stand. She didn't open it yet, only let the jurors see it resting there like a sealed secret. Dr. Harris, she said softly, why did you have that federal identification with you on March 15th? Linda paused. Her calm gaze swept the jury, then returned to Jessica. Because I was returning from a classified briefing at federal headquarters in Capital City. That is all I can say about the meeting itself. The irony was not lost on the room. The officers had mocked her, dismissed her, and accused her of lying, yet here she stood, speaking with quiet authority, revealing just enough to unsettle the very foundation of their claim. Jessica smiled faintly. No further questions at this time. Linda stepped down. She returned to her seat, placed the briefcase by her chair, and folded her hands neatly on the table. She looked like a woman in control of herself, even as the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. They shouted questions as people spilled out for recess. Some asked who Linda really was. Others asked why two officers would risk their credibility if she truly worked in the government. Linda said nothing. She walked straight to her car, her face calm, her silence unshakable. At home in Pinewood Estates, the walls of her modest colonial house told the truth her enemies refused to see. Framed photographs lined the hallway. One showed her shaking hands with presidents. Another showed her receiving awards from top officials. A third captured her in tactical gear, commanding a team of agents outside a building marked with Joint Task Force signs. Her daughter, Emily Harris, called that evening. "Mom, how did it go today?" Emily asked nervously. "As expected," Linda answered, settling into her chair. "Officer Cooper performed exactly as I thought he would. He relied on arrogance, not facts. But what if the jury believes him?" Emily's voice cracked. "They may believe him for now," Linda said softly, spreading the folder's contents across her desk. "But tomorrow, we present evidence." On the table lay dashboard camera footage, radio transcripts, GPS data, and something else, a piece of proof that would change everything. Emily hesitated. "Mom, what do you really do for Homeland Security?" Linda looked at the commendations on her wall, the certificates, the photographs of moments that defined her life. "I protect the Constitution," she said simply. Sometimes from foreign threats, sometimes from people wearing badges at home. She closed the folder, her eyes steady. Tomorrow, the courtroom would see the truth. By the third day, the air inside the Maple County Courthouse was heavy with whispers. People came early, squeezing into the benches, waiting for something they could not yet name. Word had spread that Dr. Linda Harris had more to show, more than calm words and quiet discipline. The crowd wanted answers. Linda entered with the same steady steps as before. She carried her briefcase, her shoulders straight, her face unreadable. Her lawyer, Jessica Brown, walked beside her, a tablet tucked under her arm. The calm confidence between them was in sharp contrast to the officers across the aisle. Officer Brian Cooper sat with his chin up, but his eyes betrayed him. They shifted nervously toward the jury box. Officer Jason Miller looked even worse. His hands shook slightly as he clutched the edge of the table. Judge Edward Wilson banged the gavel. "This court is now in session." Jessica rose. "Your Honor, the defense would like to present crucial evidence." At once, murmurs spread like wildfire. The officer's attorney, Mark Anderson, jumped up. "Objection! We were not told of this." Jessica's reply was cool. "The evidence is from Dr. Harris's personal dashboard camera. It is legal, authentic, and vital to this case." Judge Wilson narrowed his eyes. "Do you have it ready?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned back. "Proceed." The courtroom stilled as the lights dimmed and a screen lowered in front of the jury. Every eye fixed on the glowing rectangle. The silence was so sharp that even the creak of the wooden benches sounded like thunder. Jessica pressed play. The video showed Linda's car traveling calmly along Highway 47. The timestamp flashed, 7:47 p.m. She slowed, signaled, and pulled over neatly onto the shoulder. Nothing reckless, nothing wild. Some jurors exchanged looks. Already, it was different from the tale Cooper told. Then the audio came. Cooper's voice, loud and mocking. "Check this out, Jason. Bet you $20. She cries about profiling before I even ask her name." Laughter followed. Miller's voice answered, "Nah, I bet she pulls the important person card first. These people always think they're special." Gasps shot through the courtroom. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A man shook his head slowly, whispering. Before they even walked up on screen, Linda's voice appeared, calm and professional. "Good evening, officer. I'll be reaching for my license and registration now." Her tone was measured, respectful. The jury leaned in, eyes narrowing. She wasn't combative. She wasn't loud. She was disciplined. The video showed her handing over documents. Cooper's face came into view, irritated, not cautious. His voice dripped with sarcasm. "These look real fancy, but anybody can buy fake badges online." Then came the whisper the courtroom wasn't ready for. As Cooper stepped back toward Miller, the microphone caught him muttering, "Damn it, these actually look legit. But no way this lady is federal. Look at her." Miller's nervous voice followed. "Maybe we should call it in no," Cooper snapped. "I'm not about to get pumped. Besides, look at this neighborhood. You think Homeland Security lives around here?" The gallery erupted in noise. Shocked voices clashed, spilling over like water from a broken dam. Judge Wilson slammed the gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" But it was too late. The lie was already exposed. The footage continued. It showed Linda stepping out of the car slowly, her hands raised in clear sight. Her voice remained calm. "Officer, my credentials can be verified with a single call. Here is the direct number." "On screen," Cooper sneered. "Lady, I don't care if you say you work for the president himself. Keep talking and you'll be in cuffs." Gasps again. Even the jurors shook their heads. One juror, an older man with gray hair, muttered audibly, "That's not procedure." The video showed Cooper rolling his eyes and mocking Linda behind her back. Miller glanced at the camera nervously but said nothing. And then, the moment that froze the entire room, Cooper snapped the cuffs around Linda's wrists and muttered, "Another one bites the dust. These people think dressing nice means they can scare us. Not happening." The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. The jury sat stunned. The gallery stared wide-eyed. Even Judge Wilson leaned back slowly in his chair, his face pale. Jessica broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have just witnessed the truth with your own eyes and ears. Dr. Harris never raised her voice. She never resisted. She offered legal credentials. And they mocked her. They humiliated her. They arrested her not because she broke the law, but because they decided she could not be who she said she was." Anderson stood, his voice trembling. This could have been edited, counselor." Judge Wilson cut him short, his voice firm. "Do you have proof of tampering?" Anderson faltered. "Not at this moment." "Then the footage stands." Cooper stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Miller sank lower into his seat, his face pale, his hands trembling. The jurors exchanged looks. Some leaned forward, their faces angry. The weight of the evidence had crushed the story the officers told. Jessica held up a thick folder. "And this," she said softly, "is not all. We have radio transcripts. We have records. We have patterns." She let her words hang, like storm clouds ready to break. The courtroom buzzed again. People whispered to each other in disbelief. Judge Wilson called a recess, but the noise didn't stop. As Linda walked quietly from the room, reporters rushed forward in the hallway. Cameras flashed. "Dr. Harris, are you really federal? Will you press charges? What's next?" She said nothing. She walked past them like stone, her silence more powerful than any speech. That night, back in her home in Pinewood Estates, Linda spread the remaining evidence across her desk. Her daughter, Emily Harris, stood nearby, her hands shaking slightly. "Mom," Emily whispered, "that video, it ruined them. Everyone saw the truth." Linda looked up, her calm eyes steady. "The video was only step one. Tomorrow, Emily, we reveal what they've been hiding for years. And when we do, they won't just lose this case. They'll lose everything. She closed the folder marked Complaints Against Officer Cooper. 8 names. 8 buried stories. Tomorrow, those stories would come alive in the courtroom. The 4th day in the Maple County Courthouse felt like a storm waiting to break. Every seat was taken, and people stood along the walls pressing close to catch even a glimpse. The dashcam video had shaken the town. It had ripped holes in the officer's story, but whispers filled the air. Was that one bad night? Or was there more? Judge Edward Wilson entered, his face heavy with the weight of what was to come. He called the court to order, his gavel echoing through the tense room. Jessica Brown stood calmly, a thick file in her hands. She looked at the jury, then at the judge. Your Honor, the defense would like to call Officer Brian Cooper back to the stand. Cooper shifted in his chair. His lawyer, Mark Anderson, leaned toward him, whispering fiercely. But Cooper had no choice. Slowly, he rose and walked to the witness stand, his boots striking the floor louder than usual. The bailiff, Charles Bennett, swore him in again. Cooper's voice cracked slightly as he answered, I do. Jessica approached, holding the thick folder. Officer Cooper, she began, her tone steady. How many complaints have been filed against you in the past 5 years? Cooper blinked. I don't know the exact number. Jessica tapped the folder. Would 8 sound correct? The room stirred. A loud gasp came from the gallery. Cooper's face flushed. Those were misunderstandings. None of them were sustained. Jessica opened the folder slowly, pulling out one paper at a time. Let's refresh your memory. She held up the first sheet. Mrs. Margaret Lewis, age 67, pulled over for suspicious behavior while driving to her grandson's graduation. You told her to stay in her lane. Do you remember? Cooper swallowed hard. I don't recall the details. Jessica set the paper down. She lifted another. Mr. Thomas Reed, age 34, detained because you claimed he matched a suspect description, but when asked to provide the description, you could not. Do you remember telling him his kind always causes trouble in TA? This neighborhood? Cooper's lawyer leapt up. Objection! Irrelevant. Judge Wilson leaned forward. Overruled. The jury will hear this. Jessica's voice sharpened. Answer the question, Officer Cooper. Cooper's jaw tightened. I may have said something, but... Jessica cut him off. Thank you. That will do. She lifted another sheet. Miss Barbara King, age 28, arrested for disorderly conduct after asking why she was stopped. Video evidence later showed she never raised Ashnesh, her voice, or made any threatening gesture. But you called her an entitled princess who thinks she's special. Do you deny this? Cooper gripped the witness stand so tightly his knuckles turned white. His silence was louder than words. Jessica turned slowly toward the jury. Notice a pattern? She asked, her voice calm but cutting. Every complaint involves citizens of color. Everyone was dismissed. Everyone buried. The jurors shifted, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Jessica faced Cooper again. In 15 years, officer, how many white citizens have you arrested for disorderly conduct during a traffic stop? Cooper's eyes darted around the room. I don't keep statistics. Jessica opened another page. I do. 0. Not 1 in 15 years. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Judge Wilson banged his gavel, but the damage was done. Jessica stepped back. No further questions for this witness. Cooper stumbled off the stand, his once-brown posture broken. He slumped into his chair, his face red with shame. Jessica turned. The defense calls Officer Jason Miller to the stand. Miller's face drained of color. His lawyer urged him to stay quiet, but the judge had already called his name. He walked slowly, shoulders bent, and sat in the witness box. Officer Miller, Jessica began, you had been Officer Cooper's partner for 3 years. During that time, have you heard him make racially insulting remarks about citizens? Miller hesitated, his eyes darting toward Cooper. Sometimes officers get frustrated. That's not what I asked, Jessica interrupted. Yes or no? The silence stretched long and painful. Finally, Miller whispered, yes. Gasps filled the room again. Jessica leaned closer. Did you ever report him? Miller's voice cracked. No. Why not? His shoulders sagged. Because he said it was just how cops talk. He told me reporting him would make me a snitch. Jessica's voice rose with quiet strength. Officer Miller, do you realize that by staying silent, you became part of this pattern of abuse? Tears formed in Miller's eyes. Yes. The gallery buzzed louder. Even some jurors looked disgusted. Jessica turned away from him, picking up the thick file once more. Your Honor, I am submitting into evidence 8 official complaints dismissed by this department. Each shows a citizen humiliated, insulted, or wrongfully arrested. Each involves these officers, and each was buried without proper review. She placed the file firmly on the table, the sound echoing like a hammer. This is not one bad night, Jessica continued, her voice steady but fierce. This is a pattern that tells citizens they are powerless, a pattern that says badges can crush dignity without consequence. And today, that pattern ends. The jury was riveted. The gallery was alive with whispers, some angry, some sorrowful. Even Judge Wilson's face looked grave. The officer's lawyer, Anderson, tried to object again, but his voice lacked strength. The jury had already seen too much. As the session ended for the day, Linda walked out, her steps steady, her head high. Reporters swarmed the hallways, their questions frantic. Dr. Harris, how do you feel now that the officer's history is exposed? Do you think justice will be done? She did not answer. She didn't need to. Her silence, her calm eyes, her dignity, they spoke louder than any words. That night at her home in Pinewood Estates, Linda sat at her desk with her daughter Emily. The young Lostgen's eyes shone with both pride and fear. Mom, Emily whispered, they're finished. Everyone saw the truth today. Linda looked at her gently. Truth is powerful, Emily, but justice is not finished yet. Tomorrow will be the hardest part. Tomorrow we prove beyond doubt who I am and why their lies can no longer stand. She closed her briefcase. The last piece of evidence was ready. Tomorrow, the courtroom would hear it. The final day of the trial arrived with a sense of gravity that weighed on everyone in the Maple County Courthouse. The benches were overflowing, the aisles crowded with people leaning against the walls, even reporters squeezed shoulder to shoulder. The town had never seen a case like this. Dr. Linda Harris walked in with the same composure she had carried since the first day. She held her briefcase close, her navy blazer buttoned neatly. There was no arrogance in her face, only calm strength. Her daughter, Emily Harris, sat in the front row, her eyes filled with worry, but also pride. Across the room, Officer Brian Cooper looked like a shadow of the man who had mocked Linda on the courthouse steps. His uniform still fit, but the authority in his posture was gone. Officer Jason Miller sat pale and slumped, his hands trembling in his lap. Judge Edward Wilson entered. His gavel struck hard. Court is now in session. Defense may proceed. Jessica Brown stood slowly. She held a sheet of paper but kept her eyes on the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice steady, you have seen the dashcam footage. You have heard the testimony. You know this was not one mistake but a pattern of abuse. But today, you will learn who Dr. Harris truly is and why everything these officers said crumbles under the weight of her truth. Mark Anderson, the officer's lawyer, stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. We still question the authenticity of these so-called credentials. Anyone can create documents that look official. Judge Wilson adjusted his glasses. Counselor Brown, can you provide independent verification? Jessica's lips curved into the faintest smile. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Deputy Director William Scott of the Department of Homeland Security. The doors opened. A tall man in a black suit entered, his presence commanding. 2 agents flanked him. The entire courtroom hushed. Whispers rippled like waves. Homeland Security? Here? Deputy Director Scott approached the witness stand, his steps firm. He placed his hand on the Bible, his voice deep and steady. I do. Please state your name and position for the record, Jessica said. William Scott, Deputy Director, United States Department of Homeland Security. I oversee domestic counterterrorism operations and federal law enforcement coordination across 34 states, including this jurisdiction. The room fell into stunned silence. Jessica leaned closer. Deputy Director, do you know Dr. Linda Harris? Yes, he said firmly. Dr. Harris reports directly to me. She is the Assistant Director for Federal Law Enforcement Standards and Training. She has held this position for 8 years. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the jury looked shaken. Jessica turned to the jury. Do you hear that? Assistant Director. Not a liar, not a fraud, not a woman waving fake papers. The officers arrested a woman who actually trains law enforcement nationwide. Deputy Director Scott continued, his voice unwavering. Dr. Harris oversees constitutional compliance protocols for all federal law enforcement. Her work impacts the training of more than 800,000 officers across the United States. On the night in question, she was returning from a classified briefing in Capital City concerning police accountability. The officers ignored her credentials, ignored her offers of verification, and placed her under unlawful arrest. The words hit like stone. Cooper dropped his head into his hands. Miller's lips trembled. Jessica faced the jury once more. This is the woman they mocked. This is the woman they called a liar. And this is the woman they humiliated in front of all of you. A woman who has spent her life protecting this nation. The courtroom was silent, the weight unbearable. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. Members of the jury, you may deliberate. The jurors filed out. The gallery buzzed, but the officers sat frozen, knowing their world had already collapsed. After 47 minutes, the jury returned. The foreman, an older man with tired eyes, handed the verdict to the bailiff. Judge Wilson unfolded it, then read aloud. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law against Officer Brian Cooper, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp spread like thunder. Cooper's shoulders slumped as his wife in the gallery burst into tears. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights against Officer Jason Miller, we find the defendant guilty. Miller closed his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek. Judge Wilson's voice was solemn. Officer Cooper, you are sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, immediate termination, and a lifetime ban from law enforcement. Officer Miller, for your cooperation and remorse, you are sentenced to 1 year of community service, probation, and termination from law enforcement. The gavel struck. Court dismissed. The room exploded, some cheering, some crying, some silent in shock. Reporters rushed out to broadcast the news. Linda stood slowly. She gathered her briefcase and looked toward her daughter. Emily rushed into her arms, hugging her tightly. You did it, Mom, Emily whispered, tears wetting her cheeks. You showed them who you are. Linda held her daughter close. No, she said softly. I showed them who we all are, people who deserve respect, no matter our skin, no matter where we live. 6 months later, life looked very different. At the Greenwood Mall, Brian Cooper walked in a cheap security guard uniform. The polyester itched, the plastic badge meant nothing. Teenagers ignored him, shoppers passed by without a glance. The man who once mocked a woman in handcuffs now told kids not to loiter by the food court. Jason Miller wore an orange vest by the side of Highway 62, picking up trash in the hot sun. Each passing government car reminded him of what he had thrown away because he stayed silent when he should have spoken. But for Linda, life had risen higher. She stood inside the Liberty Senate building, testifying before lawmakers. Cameras broadcast her voice across the country. She spoke calmly about accountability, about dignity, about change. Her recommendations became the Harris Protocols, adopted nationwide, ensuring federal verification procedures and stricter oversight of complaints. In the audience, Emily Harris sat proudly, now graduated from Jefferson Law School, inspired by her mother's courage. My mother taught me that dignity isn't about how others treat you, Emily said in her graduation speech. It's about how you treat yourself, even when the world tries to strip you down. Dr. Linda Harris sat watching, her eyes glistening with pride, her hands folded quietly in her lap. The officer's laughter had long faded, but her dignity had endured. And in the end, the truth spoke louder than any insult. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, remember that dignity and truth will always outlive lies and prejudice. Dr. Linda Harris stood strong when others tried to break her, and in the end, justice spoke louder than their laughter. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one to light. Stay blessed, and never forget, sometimes the calmest voice carries the greatest strength.